Hey everyone, welcome back to VexHexGames. Today with me I have the awesome Patryk, and we're going to chat about theater. Patryk, you want to go ahead and say some hellos?
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick. I've been involved in the theater world for quite some time, actually. I would say about over a decade, if not longer. And coming from a theater major education, I from a college coming from a college education with a theater major, I should have a lot of knowledge to inform you all about the world of theater, whether it be theater past, present, or future.
Very cool, thanks for that. Yeah, and I've been doing theater stuff for, I think, around the same time as you. I want to say around 15 or 16 years, something like that. It's well over a decade too. So that's kind of a little
Yeah.
background about us for theater. Definitely theater nerds here.
Oh yeah.
So one of the
Great
things
place,
that I kind
all.
of want to kick things off with is by asking you from your perspective, what are some of your favorite elements of theater? Like why do theater, you know?
Well, one of the things I like to do, especially when I'm on stage in theater, is I like to just be somebody that I'm not, and it's actually really fun to actually be a different character than I truly am as a human being.
Awesome. What are some of the kind of parts of theater that you've done? Obviously you've acted, but what are some other things that you remember doing?
Well, during college, I was more of like a behind the scenes person. I mean, obviously, I wanted to get on the stage forever, but I was more involved like behind the scenes with all the uh, all the main stage shows. Like I've done like the light board operating, the soundboard operating. I've even done like a projections operator, and also like set design, set building, scenic painting, and even costume construction.
Very cool. Which ones were your favorite, do you think? If you had to pick like a top fave from that list.
Oh, I would have without question costuming.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, one of the electives I took in college was called costume construction, and I mean, it was fun to learn to use a sewing machine because that's like the main tool we use to create our costumes, like with the fabric and the sewing stuff and all that stuff. But once you create your final project, it's that's where the real fun comes in.
What types of costumes were you making for shows? Like, can you give me a show example?
Well, we did. Well, the one costume that I recall doing, it was actually like believe it or not, it was a show that one of my faculty members wrote. It was a show called Kiss the Bride, and it was basically about a wedding, and it was basically like just a generic like wedding guest suit. Like let's say like a wedding guest, not like a groomsman, but let's say like just like a casual suit and tie type deal.
Neat. How long did it take you to make that?
Oh, it took a long time. Instead of like creating the costume itself, you actually like do a lot of like measurements and generally for the most part, we just like buy a suit from the store. If you want to get a little more detailed, let's say like one of the musicals we did was Peter Pan, and making the tunics and everything that took a really long time
I
because
gotcha.
you had to like find the measurements of the actors, get the type of tunic designs, and the proper fabric, so like no one's like itching or scratching or being uncomfortable wearing the costume.
What kind of advice would you have for people who are interested in getting into costume designing, but they're terrible at math? Because I know that there's a lot of measurements and basic mathematical calculations that goes into it to try to figure out, getting the perfect size. So, what kind of advice would you give to people who are a little bit more skeptical of doing that?
Well, again, this is coming from my own little bias because I have a very big mathy background,
Mm-hmm.
and so from for me it was really not really a big deal. But I would always say like always start with the basics, like just do like like general arithmetic, like let's say use like a tape measure, just like do like simple addition and subtraction and all that stuff, and then as the more you get comfortable with the addition and subtraction, then you get a little more advanced. Similar with creating costumes, it's like more like it's like a parallel approach. Now I'm using like math terms, parallel. Like the more you get comfortable with the arithmetic, then you can get a little more advanced with that. Same with costumes. The more you get more comfortable with designing the costumes or creating the costumes, then you can get more advanced with that. So I would say it's more like think of it like you're starting out with whatever it is you're learning out. You're starting with whatever it is, and then you could move your way up with the more experience that you have.
Cool, I got you. If you could design the costumes for any show imaginable, which one would you pick? Like, if you just had all the skill in the world, right? And you just wanted to go nuts with designing, which show would you pick?
That's a really tough question, if I'll be really honest with you. I mean, it depends if I want to be lazy or not. Because if I want to be lazy, I'd pick like just like a simple show with like one of the shows I did a long time ago. I did a show, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where we're basically like in like a patient, in like a little like psychotic patient's outfit, so it's like all gray and all that stuff. So a little simple with that. As the lazy method, if you want to get a little more creative, um, yeah, this is a really tough question actually. I guess my answer is it depends if I want to be lazy that day.
I got you. What would you say is probably the show that you remember the most? Like the one that really stands out to you in your theater career? The one that you absolutely adore thinking back on being a part of?
Well, as mentioned, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was actually my favorite straight play that I did, and you could just tell that. I mean, my character was basically like there's just someone who had a very explosive attitude. Like my character's name was Scanlan, and I was in the psychotic ward because I was obsessed with explosions and bombs and whatever. That's for straight play, but with musicals, without question, Young Frankenstein. I played the role of the village idiot. My dad saw the show and he jokingly was like, "Oh, you didn't have to act for that role." I'm like, I just looked at him like, "Sure, let's go with that."
For when you did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, obviously, it's a movie that has a lot of fame and recognition of its own accord. But when you guys were putting it on for the stage version, how did you guys make sure to kind of differentiate so the production was your own rather than a lot of stage productions where they just try to copy everything that happens on film?
Well, I do know they did do a lot of actor combinations playing like two different roles. So that was definitely one thing that was a little distinguishable. And I also remember they cut out a character altogether and replaced it with a different character.
Did they have, say, a character for Act 1 and then they had the person play somebody else for Act 2, or did they split it within the same act?
Actually, yes, Act One was the one character. Act Two was a different character.
Okay, that seems to be how a lot of shows do it, especially for like Willy Wonka or the Shrek the Musical or things like that. But I wasn't sure how they went about it with your production for that one specifically, just because it is so tense and requires a lot of attention.
Yeah, I mean, there's only like one or two characters from what I recall who was able to do that.
Right.
Generally, for the most part, it was just one character, one actor for one character.
Well, that one actually segues into my next question, which is, do you prefer doing musicals or straight plays more?
Straight plays.
Why?
Because I feel like straight plays requires the less energy because when you're doing musicals, you got to keep in mind there's the singing aspect, there's the choreography aspect, and there's a lot of basically it takes a lot out of you. As opposed to a straight play, you're just on stage like reciting monologues. I mean, there's some choreography, but not as intense and not as much.
There's more fight choreography in straight plays, I feel, than dance choreography.
There is, but depending on what type of show it is and how intense the scene is, and also depends on what the characters you're portraying. And it could either be the easiest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world.
What are some of the top shows that you think probably took the most energy to be able to get through the performances for?
Well, right before COVID hit, I was actually about to do a production of Spam a lot, and the rehearsals themselves were a real pain in the neck because we had a really small cast to begin with, and we were just basically we had no time to basically take a rest in the dressing room. Like we were just like running around behind the scenes like every chance we got, and even the energy on the stage was so intense. The energy behind the stage was even more intense.
I
But
get it.
unfortunately, that play did not come to be because the week COVID started was supposed to be our dress rehearsal, so that show got canceled altogether. And to tell you the truth, I have not done a show since.
That was going to be actually my next question is kind of what has been your experience with theater, especially since, you majored in it and everything with the pandemic situation? How has it affected you personally as an actor?
Well, I will tell you, when I was about to do Spam a lot, believe it or not, this is actually my seventh show in a row that I was doing, and I just got cast for my eighth show, which was a straight play, which I can honestly tell you I forgot what straight play it was because we only had one rehearsal, and that was basically it.
Because of
After
the
seven shows,
pandemic?
yes. After seven shows in a row, it was definitely a really exhausting time for me. Plus, in my personal life, some exhausting things were going on too, and realistically speaking, like right when the show got canceled, believe it or not, coincidentally, my where I work, they gave us like 8 weeks off of like paid leave. So I actually used those 8 weeks off and took that time very, very wisely. Believe it or not, what I did during that time, I spent 3 hours a day doing psychology research as a way to A, improve my mental health, B, see how other people react to their mental health with what was going on in the world.
What are some of the plays that stand out to you, either that you've been in or that you know of, that really hit home with that topic, you know?
I mean, like psychology related.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good question. Because I mean, I will tell you, for not long ago, I actually did like a Zoom production, which was something I'm not really counting toward, but it was a Zoom production about like it was like a lot of newly written plays at a theater that I found out about through a friend of mine, and one of the plays me and actually my friend was in were like was like a hypnotherapist's office where I played the hypnotherapist and the patient who was my friend at the time was like acting all crazy and whatever, and that was I feel like there seemed to be like a psychological twist to it in the writer's mind. It wasn't. I knew it wasn't strictly to entertain people. It was basically a real life scenario that went on in real life. I did have some pretty cathartic moments on stage when I was actually doing the show with some. I was actually doing one of it was actually during one of the performances. Like I remember I was like looking into Nurse Ratchet's eyes, and the actress could just tell that I was like really looking deep into her soul at that point. And I spoke to her like during the intermission that like yeah, I don't know why, but during your monologue at that point, it really resonated with something I was going through at that point. But it was happening during that moment, and I don't know why it hit me that at that moment, but I don't know, just the way you presented it that time, it just really hit my soul in a really deep way.
What do you think was your least favorite role or the show that probably gave you the least joy?
I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, because I mean, each show had their own twist to it, and I never really had a disappointing role at all. I never had a disappointing experience being on the stage at all, so nothing really stands out.
Are there any professors or teachers that you had, especially in college, who just completely changed or kind of rewrote your theater experience? Either,
Yes.
I'm going to say for the better.
Yes, actually, I had two of them, both of whom I love to my very very soul. One of them I'm a little convinced is going to retire very soon, so I kind of want to like email her very soon. She was actually my world theater and script analysis professor, and she was one of those professors where you loved her as a person, but you hated her as a professor.
Yes, I've definitely had my share of those.
Yeah, because like I mean, she was a very lovely human being. Like she was from she was from Tennessee and had like this Tennessee accent, and she was literally one of the most lovely human beings I've ever met. But her coursework, oh my god, was like a friggin' nightmare. But I will never regret the stuff that I learned in her courses because it's stuff that I actually do to this very day. Believe it or not, when I go in terms of like my personal interest, because one half of the script analysis course was the name of the course is called script analysis and dramaturgy. Script analysis is when you basically do a report inside the script itself. The dramaturgy is when you do research outside of the script that actually makes the script as is. I found out I love dramaturgy. Their show is an entire team. Like there's obviously the actors on stage, there's the director, the sound people, the stage crew, all that stuff. But each individual role, like let's say behind the scenes, that's done by one person. And when you look right down to like let's say like the end credits of like a certain show or whatever, like if you watch on TV or whatever, you could see like those end credits go on for a very very long time. So and you always see like one name for like one role, like sound design, scenic design, lighting design, like all that stuff. There's usually like one role for that, but the whole production is teamwork.
Do you have a play that you probably read in college or read in a class or even just on free time in your own, life that you wish was a play that you could perform in? Like if you could make a stage adaptation of any play that you've read, which one do you think you would pick?
I do have one play in particular, and it's actually a Shakespeare play, The Tempest.
I I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but who would you want to play in it?
I feel like I'm more Prospero.
Yeah. Okay.
What were you gonna think?
I was thinking Prospero too.
Haha, yes. We think alike. That's why we get along.
I want to hear from your perspective. Why do you think that you'd make a good Prospero?
He just seems like a good main character who just he just like I don't really know. I'm not really sure how to explain it other than like he just seems like a good go-to character for me.
Okay. The reason why I said Prospero for you is because, like a lot of Shakespeare's main characters, he's a guy who has a lot of layers to him, and a lot of his layers don't come out right away, or he disguises them in a certain way where you really have to dig to find it. And I think you're one of those actors where you could probably pull out those layers with very little difficulty, and the audience would be able to get it quicker than, say, somebody who isn't as seasoned and would take a little bit longer to kind of show every side, you know?
That actually means a lot to me, to be honest with you, because that kind of defines my personality as of the last few years.
What about, is there a comedy to kind of switch gears that you wish, if you could magically cast yourself in it tomorrow and just create a whole new adaptation of it on stage, which one would you pick for a comedy?
One thing that comes to mind is The Odd Couple.
I love The Odd Couple. That's one of my favorites. I'm a big Neil
Yeah,
Simon fan.
yes. But of course, it'd be Patrick's The Odd Couple with
Right.
my own little twist to everything. And I feel like if someone like saw like the elements of Patrick in both the characters, it'd be like, wow, it's like he split himself in half.
Do you think a musical needs to have, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, a good plot to be entertaining?
I think if it has a good plot, it adds more meat to the musical.
Okay.
Like I feel like it adds more value to how quote unquote legendary the musical would be, or could potentially be.
Is there a musical that you find yourself singing along to, um, let's say at like 2 in the morning when your mind is in all kinds of crazy spots that you use to kind of help you get over whatever hump you're facing in life?
Well, if I'll be honest with you, I've been listening to the Jagged Little Pill soundtrack forever, ever since it came out.
Yes, I can understand why.
Yes, I love me some Alanis.
For anyone who doesn't know, Jagged Little Pill has become this renowned musical because it's a very emotional show, as most musicals are. But a lot of the lyrics really grip you and pull you in, and a lot of people find the the lyrics in the songs a lot more relatable and meaningful to them and the struggles that they're going through versus other musicals that might just have like fun cutesy music or more laid back and relaxed songs. So,
Yeah, I mean, for my one of my birthdays, I actually got fourth row front. I got like fourth row orchestra's tickets to the Idina Menzel show. If then, I mean, I love the music. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like that was like one of those shows where I feel like I mean, again, I don't. I feel kind of bad for saying this, but I feel like the plot was a little too confusing because it's like throughout the whole show, it splits from Adina's one character and Adina's another a different character, and it splits throughout the whole show. I mean, the music itself was freaking phenomenal, but the plot itself was really confusing me to follow.
have you ever
So I guess
tried?
that's where I'm getting. I guess that's where I'm getting my basis in terms of like having like a plot with more meat to it to make it a lot more legendary with good music.
Have you ever tried your hand at script writing?
Yes, to unsuccessful results.
What do you think are some of the biggest struggles with that?
Well, I always try to be as original as I possibly can, and I know, and I've spoken to a lot of people who have this struggle too, where I always feel like a lot of the quote unquote original stuff has already been taken and kind of came up with. And we have to really, really think outside the box. But I feel like at this stage, I kind of feel like a lot of the original stuff has been done already, and it's hard to like really come up with something mega original. And that's actually a real struggle with me. Like I don't, because honestly, my biggest fear is ripping somebody off, and worst case scenario, get sued.
Right. If you could replay any role that you've done in your life, which role would you want to go back into?
Well, obviously the two shows I mentioned you, my Cuckoo's Nest role and the Young Frankenstein role, but there's also another role that I actually did actually two roles that I did, two more roles that I actually did, because one of them I played a character in a show called Biloxi Blues. I played the character Don Carney. I really enjoyed that character because I feel like that was one of those like Prospero type characters where you don't really get to know his layers until as the show progresses. And I remember like at one point my character Don Carney, he had a very like explosive scene at one point where he's like showing how emotional he truly was, and basically he's like telling off the main character like in like his true emotion in like his true emotional form. And I kind of feel like that had, like I said, that had like a lot of like Prospero references that we were talking about earlier.
Sure.
And then the other show, which it was actually like a children's production theater show that I did a long time ago, which I had a really fun time doing. It was basically like I was basically like the show was called Superheroes Unite. I actually was it was a show about like this like town mayor and like the city council team trying to find a group of superheroes to save the town from this evil guy who's trying to take over the town. But my character was one of the bad guys undercover. So Act One, I was the good guy, but then Act Two, we found out I'm the bad guy, and I feel like that was like one of the more fun roles that I had.
Right, because you get to switch angles. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience, I prefer playing the bad guy.
And
I mean,
then
if I ever had like a picture to show you what my costume looked like, because I was dressed up as like a little like spider monster. Like I actually had like strings underneath my arms where I had like four extra arms. At one point, like I still remember this because it actually made my actor's break character like I'm like holding my real arms like kind of like to my face, and then my fake arm's like still extending. I like try to like console the villain with my other arm with my fake arm, and that just like caused a lot of laughter from like actors.
and finally the last question that I have for you is if you could sit down and have dinner or some drinks with any actor, either stage actor, movie actor, any film media history actor of all time, who are some of the people that you'd want to sit down with?
Tina Fey for one. Gilda Radner. I kind of like see her as like a one of the legendary comedians on the face of the planet. Well, because again, she was the first person ever cast on Saturday Night Live. I know I'm like going a lot more toward like certain realms of certain areas because again, I've been kind of living under a rock the last couple months, whatever for whatever. And I'm trying to think, I'd like to I'd like to have dinner with both Chris Colfer and Kevin McHale from Glee. I feel like we get along very well, the three of us.
Glee came out, when we were relatively high school going into college kind of era. Do you think that Glee played kind of a meaningful part with your future theater career? Because I know for some people it did, and then some people just couldn't stand it even at the time. So I'm curious to know kind of your thoughts on it.
Well, I wasn't really much of a Gleek back then. I mean, some of my teachers were huge Gleeks, and they would kind of make fun of me for not watching it. One of my teachers in particular, who I miss very much. But to be honest with you, that really did not affect me in that kind of a realm. I mean, it affected me more of like a general performance realm, but not more of like a theatrical realm.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today, Patrick.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And thank all of you guys for tuning in today to check out this cool theater interview. If you want, I've got Patrick's Instagram info in the description below. Make sure that you check him out on Instagram. Very cool feed. And I hope that you guys will join for the next video. Have an awesome day.